Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's quarterfinals debate. My name is Ruth Bowker, and I am the chairman of this debate. The timekeeper is Mariko Woodley, and this debate will be judged by a panel of 3 adjudicators who are Mr. Baker, Mr. Walder, and Mr. Barnett. The topic for this debate is that the Leunig should not have been sacked. The affirmative team seated to my right is Adelaide High School, and the negative team seated to my left is Aberfoyle Park Blue. The speaking time of this debate is 7 minutes and is 8 minutes, and a single warning bell will sound 1 minute before the speaking time. And a double bell will sound at the speaking time. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off. I declare this debate open and call upon the first affirmative speaker, Esther Lowry.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. I will now define the topic and provide context on the topic. Michael Leunig is an Australian cartoonist and writer with a career of over 50 years who works for The Age, a newspaper in Victoria. He creates political cartoons to be displayed in this newspaper. We define a political cartoon as a drawing, often including a caricature, made to convey commentary on politics, politicians, and current events. In late September 2021, Leunig posted a political cartoon that he created to his personal Instagram. It depicted a lone protester standing in front of a loaded syringe, referencing the mandatory COVID-19 vaccine, with an inset of a 1989 photo from the iconic Tankman image from the fight for democracy in Tiananmen Square massacre. This cartoon was deemed out of touch with readership by Gay Alkin, the editor of The Age. This led to Leunig's sacking in October 2021. We define sacking in this context as being removed from the Monday column as he retained his Saturday slot. We, the affirmative team, strongly believe that Leunig should not have been removed from his Monday position because of this cartoon. Tonight, as the first speaker, I will be talking to you about how it is Leunig's job as a political cartoonist to spark controversy with his cartoons. I will also speak about how the cartoon itself was not published in The Age, and instead he published it on his personal Instagram, where he has the right to freedom of expression. Our second speaker will be talking about how Leunig has shown a strong loyalty to The Age for 50 years and deserves to have this loyalty reciprocated. She will also speak about how the political cartoons are quintessential to upholding freedom of press in Australia. And lastly, she will talk about the concept of being in touch with readership and how Leunig's sacking was improperly justified. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. My first point is that as a political cartoonist, it is Leunig's job to use his cartoons to spark controversy and debate. It is no secret that political cartoons are controversial. As stated in the definition, they comment on politics, politicians, and current events, on which every single person has a different and divided view. In every instance, there are a group of people who find the stance of a political cartoon controversial and wrong in accordance with their beliefs. However, the goal of a political cartoon is to bring an issue to public consciousness in a succinct but effective manner to spark these debates and conversations. It challenges people's complacent acceptance of current events. An early example of this was found in the National Archives. In 1754, an artist created one commenting on the disunited state of the British colonies, which was incredibly controversial at the time, and this became the blueprint for political cartoons that followed. Moreover, it is simply unfair that Leunig was sacked due to a controversial cartoon, when that is what his and many other cartoonists' careers and popularity are built on. The more controversial the cartoon, the more people view it, the higher the recognition for the artist. How can artists be asked to sanitize their cartoons and opinions, which, when properly expressed, have the ability to reach millions and garner mass support for the artist? For example, according to a US Today article, Herbert Bloch, an artist who was known for his scathing illustrations, came to fame through his bold cartoons criticizing US politicians. Notably, one of his earliest cartoons, which became popular, was titled Here He Comes, which depicted Richard Nixon, a politician, climbing out of a sewer. It became extremely controversial, but also solidified his success and led to his permanent appointment at the Washington Post. Why was his situation treated so drastically differently from that of Leunig, whose similarly controversial cartoon placed his career in jeopardy? Furthermore, the audience of political cartoons seek out these pieces for a satirical approach to controversial topics and to gain insight into others' opinions. After the announcement of his sacking, many fans came to the defense of Leunig, with one saying, "Personally, I will not be renewing my subscription because newspapers should express and explore a diversity of views rather than toe a party-approved line." And another saying, "Who is Alcorn to decide what is too controversial to post?" And it wasn't even published in their newspaper. If everything is controversial to certain groups, and it is the job of a political cartoonist to encourage people to dissect their own opinions, then why should certain topics be censored and Leunig sacked as a result? My second point is that the cartoon itself was published on Leunig's personal Instagram page and not in the Age, giving him the right to freedom of expression. Australia prides itself on its democratic system, and an essential aspect of this integrity of democracy is the right to freedom of expression. In Victoria, the state in which Leunig currently resides, it is stated in Section 15 of the Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities Act that every person has the right to freedom of expression, which includes the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas of all kinds, including in artistic mediums and on social media. The importance of this right cannot be understated, and according to the Australian Human Rights Commission, it is the foundational stone of a functional democracy. Michael Leunig was acting in accordance with this right. The decision to remove him from his long-held position of Monday editorial slot of The Age is unjust and a violation of his right of expression. There are select circumstances in which the right to freedom of expression can be overturned. However, these are only in cases where the prevention of individual expression would ensure respect for the rights and reputations of others, as stated by the Rights Commission, for example, in the prevention of inciting war or extreme violence. However, Leunig's cartoon in no way infringes these rights. Furthermore, the cartoon was posted on his personal Instagram page, where he is free to express his views. According to the Freedom Forum Institute on social media, every perspective from both positive and negative sides is allowed to have a voice, although they must not contain propaganda for war, provocation of imminent violence, or hate speech based on race, ethnicity, gender, or religion that incites war, as stated in the Fair Work Act. Leunig's cartoon does not contain anything to infringe these rules, and for the Age to sack him for expressing his views in a separate media from the newspaper is outrageous. In no way does Leunig's cartoon threaten the rights of others, and therefore there remains no constitutional reason for his right to be compromised and lead to his personal detriment. So, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, Leunig should unequivocally not have been sacked. He is a political cartoonist, and it is part of his job to create cartoons that comment on politics. Someone will always find it controversial, and he should not be sacked for showing a different perspective on a current event. It was also completely within his right to freedom of expression to post that cartoon on his Instagram page, and it is not an appropriate response to sack him, especially considering the cartoon was never published in the newspaper. Thank you.
I call upon the first negative speaker, Harmony Wimaladana. Sorry.
Good evening, Chairman, Timekeeper, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. We accept the definition provided by the affirmative team. However, Since his role within the company was altered to provide a Saturday cartoon rather than having the Monday editorial page position, we believe the term demoted is more fitting, and we will use this throughout our case. We, the negative team, believe this statement is undeniably false. Today, I will be discussing Leunig's past controversial cartoons, his reluctance to change, and the issues he has caused for the Age, justifying his demotion. I will also discuss Leunig's responsibility as an editorial employee at the Age. Our second speaker will discuss the harm in promoting anti-vaccine ideologies across the country. She will also focus on Leunig's insensitivity as a result of his personal background. Finally, our third speaker will rebut and summarize our case. Before I move on to my points, I would first like to address some arguments made by the opposing team. The first affirmative speaker has tried to convince you that the role of a cartoonist is meant to provoke this discussion and thought, thus he should not be silenced for it. While this may be true in the sense that generally cartoonist jobs are to be provocative, it is simply not suitable for a cartoonist to push the editor constantly, time and time again, after being refused to publish a cartoon. While it may be acceptable to post a cartoon on a private social media platform, as it is an individual account, it is inappropriate to be pushing for a piece to be published when already told not to do so. The first affirmative speaker has also attempted to tell you that the cartoon was posted to his personal account. While this is true, it does not take away the company's decision to demote him. If he can make the decision to post something that the newspaper disagrees with, the company has the right to take disciplinary action, especially as he is well known for his work for that particular paper, and the things he says reflects on the company. On top of that is irrelevant as he still works for the company, and at the point that he was demoted, he had already had about a dozen works of his rejected by the editors, and most of them were due to anti-vax sentiments, meaning that the company was in their rights to demote him as he was not making work suitable for publishing, especially due to the Aegis Code of Conduct, which I will discuss within my second point. Now on to my first point, focusing on Leunig's controversial history, demonstrating his disinclination to change and the extensive justification behind his demotion. Leunig released his first controversial cartoon back in 2015, where he challenged the science behind vaccinations and compared the Victorian government's child vaccination policies to fascism. This controversy was not taken lightly by the public and caused The Guardian to write an article calling Leunig stubborn, ignorant, and in his own nostalgic fantasy, ultimately suggesting that his opinions were becoming dated in the modern world, which will be further discussed by our second speaker. In 2019, Leunig released another controversial cartoon depicting a mother scrolling through Instagram and forgetting her child, proposing the ideology that mothers now love their phones more than their children. The cartoon was highly criticized throughout social media and the public, dubbing the cartoon as sexist, condescending, and completely judgmental of current-day mothers. Both cartoons forced the Age to release their own articles addressing the backlash and provide comments from Leunig himself to explain his cartoons. This conveyed that Leunig had caused issues within the company and that his careless behavior forced the Age to bear the consequences of his mistakes. Leunig's recurring behavior clearly demonstrates his innate reluctance and complete inability to stay relevant with the Age's current readership. It's evident that Leunig does not take responsibility and will continue his never-ending pattern of releasing inappropriate cartoons. Hence, the Age was fully justified in demoting him as he had repeatedly challenged the codes and guidelines he respected to as an employee. This extends on to my second point, which involves Leunig's responsibility to respect the Age's readership and the codes of conduct to be a journalist in Australia. The Age's Code of Conduct is a fundamental statement which guides how their employees should behave within their professional lives and provides guidance to their employees to fulfill their high ethical standards. This conduct states that their employees' overarching principles are fairness, integrity, openness, responsibility, and to commit to accuracy and truth. The code is issued by the publisher and editor-in-chief of The Age, which is currently Gay Alcorn, and applies to all editorial employees. Thus, since Leunig had the Monday editorial page position, he had the responsibility to provide fairness, accuracy, and truth throughout his work. Despite this, within the examples I provided and the cartoon being discussed, it is substantially obvious that he does not respect or abide by the conduct. Do you think comparing the mandating of COVID-19 vaccinations to the Tiananmen Square massacre is fair to all the citizens who lost their lives? Or an accurate representation of the vaccinations? or a truthful depiction of both these situations. In addition to this, the Australian Parliament's Journalist Code of Ethics, also attached to the Aegis Code of Conduct, states that employees must not give any distorting emphasis to their publications. As mentioned in my first point, Leunig released cartoons comparing the Victorian government to fascism and suggesting current-day mothers love their phones more than their children. He's also described that his job is to challenge the status quo and that he simply likes to step back and let things take course after releasing augmented and highly emphasized cartoons to the public. This recurring theme throughout all Leunig's controversial cartoons provides clear motive behind his demotion, and it does not adhere to the Aegis Code of Conduct. These codes are especially important to adhere to due to the newspaper's popularity, as it currently has 6.1 million readers, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. They've also reported a 6% increase in readers aged between 14 and 17. According to the National Library of Medicine, adolescents are easily influenced, highly impressionable, and therefore more likely to conform to Leunig's ideologies. An example of this is professional kickboxer and influencer Andrew Tate's incredibly damaging, widespread opinions on women which have influenced adolescent boys across the entire world. Leunig is a white, privileged man with incredibly controversial opinions, exactly like Andrew Tate, proving that he could potentially have the same impact on the younger generation, further demonstrating the possible implications of his cartoons and why the Age is fully justified in demoting him. Furthermore, Gay Alcorn, the editor of The Age, told The Australian that she had to pull multiple cartoons by Leunig almost entirely on the grounds that they expressed an anti-vaccination sentiment. Alcorn also expressed that Leunig had become completely out of touch with the Age's readership, showing his lack of discipline and understanding of the Age's standards. Moreover, it is commonly thought that a 3-warning rule exists whereby a dismissal or demotion can only occur after 3 warnings. However, only 1 warning is mandatory to demote or terminate an employee after a mistake which besmirches and defies a company. According to the Australian Workers' Union, employees have the right to terminate employees if they have a valid reason, and the employee is given procedural fairness. This means employees are entitled to given adequate time to undertake the improvements asked of them. Leunig's first main controversy occurred back in 2015, so he's had 7 years with multiple warnings and controversies to amend his cartoons and coincide with the readership. So in conclusion, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Leunig should have been removed from his editorial position due to his recurring controversies throughout the years, disinclination to change, and his complete lack of respect from his duties and responsibilities as an employee. Thank you.
I call upon the second affirmative speaker, Angelina Luxton.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. We, the affirmative team, firmly agree with this statement. I will begin by rebutting the points that have been made by the negative team. First of all, the first speaker has tried to tell you that the word demoted should be used instead of sacked in the title. However, we disagree with this alteration, as not only does the title of this debate specify sacked, he was disgracefully removed, tarnishing his reputation, And furthermore, he was sacked from a prestigious position, the prestigious Monday column editorial position. And this is like being removed or sacked from a project. They've also tried to tell you that Leunig is unwilling to change his ways, proving in the past that he has had anti-vaccine opinions. However, not only is Leunig entitled to freedom of expression on his own social media account, as our first speaker has already talked about, but as we will repeat throughout our team case, Leunig is a political cartoonist, and his whole job is to challenge the status quo, as he has said himself. The first negative speaker has also compared Leunig to Andrew Tate. However, this is a completely unfair comparison, as Leunig is and has been a notable political cartoonist, as we have repeated, for years. It is his job to challenge the status quo, and Andrew Tate has got not nearly as many accolades or as much respect, nor has he been named a national treasure for more than 20 years, making this comparison totally false. Our first speaker has talked to you about how, as a political cartoonist, it is quintessential to Michael Leunig's job that he sparks controversy throughout his works, further explaining how one of the first political cartoons controversially mocked the disunity of the British colonies. She's also stated that Leunig was sacked for a cartoon that was not even published in the Age, stating that his right to freedom of expression is protected under Victorian legislation. I will talk to you about how Michael Leunig's loyalty to the Age for over half a century deserves to be reciprocated, and how the publishment of the cartoon that led to Leunig's sacking symbolises the importance of freedom of the press in Australia's liberal democracy. Finally, I will speak about how the justification of Michael Leunig's removal was insufficient, especially for such a notable figure. Our third speaker will rebut and sum up our team case. My first point is that Michael Leunig, who has shown enduring loyalty to the Age for over half a century, deserves to have this unwavering loyalty reciprocated. Michael Leunig's notability and service to Australian political cartoons is simply undeniable, and his acknowledgement as a national treasure by the National Trust of Australia in 1999 consolidates this legacy. Despite his obvious notoriety, Leunig has remained steadfastly loyal, devotedly publishing his iconic political cartoons in the Age, even though his cartoons would have brought supporters regardless of which newspaper he worked for. Furthermore, there have been many cases where less notable political cartoonists that have caused controversy for their work have rightfully been defended by their employer. For example, in 2018, cartoonist Mark Knight drew a caricature of Serena Williams destroying her tennis racket in the US Open final for the Herald Sun, drawing criticism by stereotyping black women. Regardless of the widespread criticism the Herald Sun received, Peter Blunden, Managing Director of News Corp's operations in Victoria, said that Mark Knight has the strongest support of his colleagues for his depiction of Serena Williams' petulance. If the Herald Sun are willing to support a political cartoonist whose career with the newspaper has not spanned over 50 years, then surely Michael Leunig, a declared national treasure, deserves to be shown enough respect that he is not fired for simply doing his job as a political cartoonist. Furthermore, despite his discourteous removal from the Monday column, according to Michael Smith, a Channel 9 writer and reporter, the Age has continued to market his flagship annual calendar and merchandise. If this cartoon was truly so damaging to the Age's reputation and out of touch with their readership, as quoted by Gay Alcorn, the editor of the Age, then why is the Age so willing to market his lucrative annual calendar? This alone proves that Leunig should not have been sacked. My second point is that political cartoonists in newspapers symbolise one of the staples of Australia, that freedom of the press is integral to an active liberal democracy. Although it can be argued by some that Leunig's political cartoons are controversial and clumsy, his work as a notable political cartoonist undeniably drew attention to the Age and upheld the fundamental democratic principle of freedom of the press. According to Dr. Hayden Manning and Dr. Robert Fidian, PhD recipients of political science from Flinders University, political cartoonists are canaries sent down the mine shafts of public debate to discover how fresh the air is there, how safe for freedom of speech. In saying this, they have proven that the essential work that political cartoonists such as Michael Leunig do for Australia. While the mandate led to Leunig's sacking, it was not the first nor the last time that a political cartoonist will, in Leunig's own words, challenge the status quo. While making themselves target for public debate and even risking their jobs, as Leunig has proven, they provide an integral service to Australia's liberal democracy. In one of Leunig's most famous cartoons, he memorialises a famous quote that signifies the role that he, as a notable political cartoonist, plays in Australia's independent press. "I disagree with what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it." Furthermore, by sacking Leunig, the Age has removed an illustrious figure from the services that has willingly put himself in the public line of fire for 50 years. Leunig's dedication to his work is simply unmatched, and therefore he should not have been sacked by the Age. My third point is that the reasoning for his removal from the Monday editorial page was insufficient, especially for such a notable and loyal public figure. According to Gay Alcorn, Leunig was dismissed as he was out of touch with the readership of the Age. However, in an interview with The Australian, Leunig noted that his job is to challenge the status quo, and that has always been the job of the political cartoonist. This simply begs the question, if a political cartoonist's job is to challenge the status quo, then how could adhering to the status quo possibly make a good political cartoonist? I would like to remind the audience that, as addressed by our first speaker, the harsh consequences that Leunig has faced are due to a cartoon that was simply published on his personal social media accounts, and not even in the Age newspaper, yet he's still suffering these harsh consequences. Furthermore, the inadequate justification of Leunig's dismissal was accompanied by discourtesy and impoliteness, rubbing even more salt in the wound to a man that has offered more than 50 years of service to the Age. By Leunig's own testimony, his sacking was rude, blunt, discourteous, and a frustrating way to have a half-century of editorial cartooning at the Age brought to an end. Not only did Leunig deserve a more graceful and professional sacking after loyally spending 50 years with one newspaper, the reason for his removal was simply inadequate after so many years. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, Michael Leunig should not have been sacked due to his unwavering loyalty to the Age for half a century, as political cartoonists in the media symbolise the necessity for freedom of the press in any liberal democracy, and because the justification for his removal was insufficient. Thank you.
I call upon the second negative speaker, Connor McCoy.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Timekeeper, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. We, the negative team, believe this statement to be false. Before I move on to my case, I would first like to address some points made by the opposing team. The second affirmative speaker has tried to convince you that sacked is a better word to use throughout this debate. However, we as a team believe that sacked often has a connotation that the person has completely lost his job, and since that is not what happened in this case, we believe that the word demoted is more suited for this debate, especially since he's working for the same company and is maintaining his job. The second affirmative speaker has tried to tell you about the strong loyalty of Leunig to the Age. However, no matter how long someone has worked in a place, it does not take away the significance of the effects and consequences their work could have, and does not excuse them from any wrongdoing. Furthermore, if he has worked there for half a century, this strengthens our argument that he should know the code of conduct as discussed by our first speaker, and what type of work is suited for the company which he has chosen to work for. The second speaker has also discussed the freedom of press. However, as our first speaker has made very clear, when he works for a company, he has a responsibility to follow the code of conduct. She also mentioned that the reason for his removal was inadequate. But as our first speaker has discussed, and I will prove further, the reasons are more than adequate, since he has had many warnings in the past, is not following the code of conduct, and as I will discuss, he is being disrespectful to not only the victims of Tiananmen massacre, but those who are not having access to vaccines. And my second point being that it is damaging and potentially harmful to promote ideas of anti-vaccination. Now, to recap our team case so far, our first speaker has convinced you that Leunig's demotion was justified due to his repeated neglect of the code of conduct of the age, as well as his responsibilities to adhere to these regulations as he is a representation of that company. Tonight, I will be discussing 2 points. My first point is that promoting an anti-vaccination mindset as this cartoon did is simply unjustifiable and harmful to the readers. Gay Alcorn, the editor of The Age, told The Australian that, quote, "We don't mind cartoonists challenging the readers. We encourage diversity of thought, but I had a concern with cartoons perceived as anti-vaccination." It's also worth noting that usually a cartoonist's role is to poke fun and call out politicians and the rules and laws they implement, as explained by Bandit News. But a pandemic has different rules. It's not about views or opinions, it's about health and science. The COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating impacts all around the world, with countless people still experiencing the lasting consequences. And the vaccinations show up to 90% of protection against symptomatic infection, severe illness, and death, according to the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention. On top of this, since Australia reached its goal to have 95% of the population fully vaccinated, the number of daily COVID cases has steadily decreased by up to 85%, according to Our World in Data. From this data, it is clear that the COVID-19 vaccination has had positive results, and to promote and encourage 6.1 million people to not get this vaccine is unethical and dangerous. And as our first speaker has proven through the reference to Andrew Tate, when individuals with a large platform display strong opinions and thoughts, the audience is extremely easily influenced. And if this detrimental influence starts involving the health and safety of people, the magnitude of the risks and consequences increase exponentially. And although this may not be the case every single time, he is taking a significant risk, showing his recklessness, and the one time that one of his cartoons influenced people slightly too much, by the time we start to see the consequences of it, it will be too late. And whilst freedom of expression is valuable, as our first speaker has stated, when you are in a position where you are influential and have a large audience, there is a certain responsibility which comes with that, especially when it concerns the health and safety of people. And thus, as it is clear that Leunig has not considered these detrimental consequences which his cartoons can have, he is clearly not suited for his current role and therefore justifies the Aegis decision to transfer him to a different role. My second point is regarding the utter disrespect and insensitivity he showed through his cartoon, which is affected by his background, justifying his demotion. Leunig created a cartoon comparing the mandation of COVID-19 vaccinations to the Tiananmen Square massacre, which occurred in Beijing in 1989. He drew a lone protester standing in front of a loaded syringe, mimicking the iconic tank man who stood in front of a line of tanks during a protest for democracy in China. As History.com states, the Tiananmen Square massacre was a response to student-led protests in favor of free speech and democracy, which were violently suppressed by the Chinese government, with members of the military shooting and running over the crowd. This is the day that an estimated hundreds of thousands of people lost their lives. This is the day that people were killed by their own government for standing up for basic human rights. And to compare this tragic event to a potentially life-saving vaccine, which is highly protective against severe illness and death, as stated by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, is at the height of insensitivity. Now, Leunig has defended his cartoon, saying in an interview with The Australian that the Tiananmen Square image is often used in cartoons around the world as a, quote, Charlie Chaplin-like metaphor for overwhelming force meeting the innocent, powerless individual, which he felt was fair to express, and that it was justified as his job is to challenge the status quo. He believes that people are overreacting. He does not understand the magnitude of his actions and how disrespectful it is to the victims of the Tiananmen Square massacre. He has shown this kind of lack of compassion and diplomacy countless times in the past, as proven by our first speaker, and it is this sort of pattern of behavior and lack of willingness to change which suggests that his age, race, gender, and socioeconomic background is negatively affecting his work. According to latest news, Michael Leunig is a 77-year-old, white, English-speaking male with a high socioeconomic status. Someone with his privilege may not understand how it feels to experience prejudice or to not possess rights that other countries or groups do. And being born nearly 80 years ago, he could find it difficult to accept or recognize the shift in views and morals that we as a society have. This sort of cartoon or comparison would not have faced nearly as much criticism 3, 2, maybe even 1 decade ago. But as a society, we have become more compassionate and reflective of how we portray and acknowledge each individual's experiences. And having someone who doesn't understand this shift or appreciate different experiences of individuals can lead to insensitive portrayals and representations, such as this incident, which is not in the best interest of the age or the readers, justifying his demotion. So, in conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we, the negative team, believe that Leunig should not have been demoted by the age, since he is promoting unjustified, reckless, and dangerous behaviour, and as a result of his age and privileged background, has shown continuous disrespect and insensitivity towards minority groups, the age, and his audience. Thank you.
I call upon the third affirmative speaker, Kate Ross, to speak.
Good evening, Madam Chairperson, Adjudicator, and members of the audience. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. We, the affirmative team, unequivocally agree with this statement. As the third speaker, I will begin by refuting the fallacious claims of the opposition and then conclude by summarising our team's case. The second negative speaker of the opposition has tried to affirm in the definition that the word demoted should be used instead of sacked because he was not completely removed from his position. However, this is inherently wrong because he was permanently removed from the very prestigious Monday column. As our second speaker has already stated, he was removed from a prestigious position, alike being removed from any other job. Although he keeps his Saturday column, his Monday column is much more prestigious, and therefore he was still removed from a position, thus sacked. The second speaker has also continuously made references to the Tiananmen Square massacre, including making the claim that hundreds of thousands of people died. However, these claims have no source of proof and are simply unfounded, and in fact it was much less, and rather the cartoon will focus less on the people that died in the Tiananmen Square massacre, and rather citizen versus government. The opposition has also repeatedly stated that Leunig has the responsibility to comply with the Code of Conduct. However, he is a political cartoonist, and although he has to follow this Code of Conduct, there is another part in the Code of Conduct that was actually brought up by the opposition, which was openness to other opinions and views. However, censoring the views of Leunig and many of the Aegis actual subscribers, as referenced through quotes offered by our first speaker, is certainly not abiding by the Code of Conduct's terms to remain open to multiple opinions and views, debunking the claim of Code of Conduct in itself. The first speaker of the negative team has brought up the issues within the company that allegedly prove that he is out of touch with the readership. However, when publishing political art, it is guaranteed that controversy will arise, and then referencing claims where controversy has arisen does not really have much basis, especially since we have quoted many of the Aegis subscribers, which is their readership, who agree with these terms and are open to these beliefs and thoughts. The opposition also argues that these thoughts are damaging and they are, in a similar manner to Andrew Tate, they are left on impressionable audiences. However, it is Leunig's job to argue the status quo, whereas Andrew Tate does not nearly have as much basis and respect as a national treasure, as mentioned by our second speaker. Therefore, it is simply just a fallacious comparison between the two, and rather he is sparking controversy to have this sort of debate and topic. The first speaker of the negative team has also attempted to tell you that the cartoon was not a truthful depiction of the events and was unfair to the victims. And from some perspectives, this may indeed be true, that is insensitive. However, our first speaker actually discussed how the intention of a political cartoon is actually to provoke these sorts of reactions from the reader. And this is often achieved through controversial themes. The cartoon additionally does not aim to draw a comparison through the deaths of the people at the Tiananmen Square massacre. However, it is actually arguing the state of an innocent individual, an innocent and powerless individual against the overwhelming force of a government. The first speaker of the opposition has also stated that the Age has the freedom to make disciplinary decisions in the same way that Leunig has the right to freedom of expression. However, as discussed by our first speaker, such decisions still require reasonable grounds to dismiss an employee, as in accordance with the first Fair Work Act that was referred to exactly by our first speaker. According to this act, if the dismissal of an employee is unreasonable, it is not a valid and lawful dismissal. We argue that throughout our team case that this reason for his termination, that he was out of touch with the readership, was unreasonable grounds, as this claim has no evidential basis, as described through the words of the reader base outlined by our first speaker and also through the information brought forward by our second speaker. The second speaker of the opposition additionally stated that Leunig is sharing these harmful ideologies that against vaccines. However, the cartoon was not actually anti-vaccine, but rather anti-authoritarian, as stated in a quote by the readers. It was against the whole mandate of forcing people to be vaccinated rather than the idea of the vaccine in itself. The opposition has also continuously stated that he is a public figure and therefore should bear responsibility for the words he says. However, as we have repeatedly stated, he is a political cartoonist. He merely encourages people to think outside of the conformity with these ideas, and therefore he is not responsible for these debates that spark from it. Our first speaker opened our case with points regarding the cruciality of controversial views for the success of an artist that draws political cartoons and Leunig's right to freely express his views on his own personal social media. She cited the 1754 cartoons commentating on the disunited front of British colonies, which, though controversial at the time, influenced many political cartoons to come. Additionally, she described how Leunig uploaded his art on his own personal Instagram, entitling him the right to freedom of expression, thus deeming his termination unjust. Our second speaker further mentioned Leunig's long career at the Age and how disrespectful it was to simply remove him from this for doing his very job of sparking this controversy. She additionally described how there is an indisputable importance of freedom of press in our democratic society, questioning the reason under which Leunig was sacked, which is that he was out of touch with the readership. So, Chairperson, members of the audience, throughout this debate, we, the Affirmative team, have provided a strong case towards the logical, moral, and simply ethical flaws in firing Leunig from his Monday slot in the Age. From myriad perspectives on this issue, it simply does not make sense for Leunig to be sacked after 50 years of working for the Age and establishing his suitably political views in his cartoons. How does it make sense to sack someone for an opinion that is supposedly out of touch with the readership, despite the primary readership's continuous approval of his cartoons, that was not even published in the newspaper, but rather his own personal social media? Thank you.
call upon the third negative speaker, Georgia Warren.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, Timekeeper, ladies and gentlemen. The topic for tonight's debate is that Leunig should not have been sacked. We, as the negative team, firmly believe that this statement is wrong. Before I move on to summarising my team's case, I would first like to address some points made by the opposing team. The first affirmative speaker has tried to tell you that people will always disagree with political cartoons, as that is the point of them, and the more controversial something is, the more people will see. However, as our second speaker expanded on, when the cartoon involves potentially putting people in danger, such as encouraging anti-vaccination mindset, this takes priority over controversy or number of views. She also stated that Leunig should not have been sacked because he was important to the country and is considered a national treasure. However, this is an illegitimate point. This is because as he is a national treasure and as he is influential in society, it makes what he says and what he decides to put out on the internet more important, as it affects a larger number of people. And also, just because he's considered a national treasure doesn't necessarily mean his views are good or in line with modern times. They also said that as he has been with the company for a long period of time, that his loyalty is more important, they should reciprocate the same amount. However, there were many times in the past where he had posted cartoons where the company had then had to come back and release statements of their own because they had been considered too controversial and too many people had had issues with them. The second negative speaker also spoke about freedom of press. However, as our first speaker stated, it's very clear, as he works with the company and has been working for the company for 50 years, they have a code of conduct that tells them what they are allowed to talk about and what their responsibilities are in terms of what they are publishing. They also stated that since the Tank Man image was used more in comparing the massacre to the government against the people and the authoritarianism rather than the actual massacre itself, there's many different examples that could have been used that show political without the murder of thousands of people. Especially considering this massacre has nothing to do with vaccines, and it was actually fighting for democracy and basic human rights, not because they had to take a vaccine to be able to go out and see their friends. They also said that he's not anti-vaccine and he's actually anti-mandation of vaccine. However, it is crucial to point out this opinion indirectly and directly affects people's health. While it is okay if he gets sick from COVID because he is unvaccinated or chooses to disbelieve in vaccines or the mandation, he will indirectly expose people around him to COVID, putting others in danger. Furthermore, a portion of people who utilize social media platforms are uninformed and extremely gullible. And if someone like himself, who is considered a national treasure, posts about this, they are much more likely to believe it. They have also stated that our second speaker had no source for the hundreds of thousands of people, and that is not true. However, that is irrelevant to the point. The point was that he is insensitive. No matter how many people have died, it is still insensitive to connect having to get a vaccine to a time when people were murdered for standing up for their own basic human rights. And they also said that comparing him with Andrew Tate is fallacious because they are entirely different people and he is he has much more backing him up. However, it is not fallacious, as it shows that these men with these big platforms can both have detrimental effects on adolescents and younger generations. And also they kept stating that this cartoon was not even published, it was just posted on Instagram. However, it was rejected by the Age. That is the reason it was never published, because they did not accept it to be published. Now moving on to my team's summary. Our first speaker has told you that this is not Leunig's first time making a comic that has been considered controversial, as he has made multiple comics in the past that have received public backlash. One of these comics also holding an anti-vax sentiment, protesting child vaccination policies in Victoria back in 2015, and another comic in 2019 promoting the ideas that mothers were becoming more invested in their phones than their own children. The first of these comics caused an article to be published by The Guardian calling him ignorant, while both received heavy adverse reactions through social platforms. In both cases, The Age had to release statements about the comics in an attempt to placate readers and justify his actions. These events both show his disconnect with the readership and show his refusal to stop releasing inappropriate comments, validating the company's decision to demote him. She also discussed Leunig's responsibility to follow the Aegis Code of Conduct, which outlines how all journalists and editorial employees, like Leunig, should behave in their professional lives. This conduct states that their employees' overarching principles are fairness, integrity, openness, responsibility, and commitment to accuracy and truth. Additionally to this, the Australian Parliament's Journalist Code of Ethics also states that employees must not give distorting emphasis to their publications, like Leunig has with the comparison of Victorian government to fascism and other comics he has made. Our second speaker talked about the dangers of promoting an anti-vax ideology and how The Age is hesitant about publishing that specifically, especially as an environment such as the current one, with a pandemic the likes of which has not been seen in many years. People's opinions and thoughts are not as important as the sciences, as well as the health of the general public. Considering the positive impacts the vaccine has had on various societies, with proven positive results and statistics, it is simply unnecessary to promote this negative ideology. She also explained to you that this comic was highly insensitive and a valid reason for The Age to make the final decision about demoting him after the previously mentioned occurrences where his works have received backlash and the company has then had to defend him. The comic itself was a mimic of the Tank Man photo, a photo taken from the Tiananmen Square massacre, where an estimated hundreds of thousands of people were killed standing up for democracy only to be shot down by their own government, which was released by the BBC. Comparing this tragedy to a potentially life-saving vaccine in the middle of a pandemic is insensitive to so many people, as well as extremely inappropriate and irresponsible. His defense of himself lacks compassion for the people affected by this massacre, and this attitude is one that he has held in the past where his works have caused controversy, a pattern of behaviour which has been shown multiple times, showing again his unwillingness to take other perspectives into account and the problems this causes for The Age. In conclusion, Madam Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, we, the negative team, believe that Leunig should have been demoted by The Age, since he has had a history of controversies and does not follow the code of conduct he is held by. He is also promoting unjustified, reckless, and dangerous behaviour, and a result of his age and privileged background has shown continuous insensitivity. Thank you.
While the adjudicators finalise the result, I will read the evening's chairman notices, which I don't think there are any. So
I don't think so.
we'll just wait for them.
Were you laughing? I think you were, because you came out and you looked like kind of white. It was like, yeah, he just. He didn't mean. He didn't buzz out. I think it's that little bit of space was to no good.
Get it right.
There's still a few kids there. Across the two. No, that was.
Yeah, and also the.
But you know the irony.
Or they go down that's what I'm saying.
I invite a representative of the adjudication panel to come forward and announce their result.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mr. Baker. I'm a representative of the adjudication panel this evening. Congratulations to both teams on making the finals this evening and for such an entertaining debate. Both teams have to be congratulated. Well done. As each of the three adjudicators this evening have arrived at their decisions independently, there's no individual speaker by speaker critique like we normally do in the regular rounds. But I can announce that tonight was a unanimous decision and it went to the affirmative team. Congratulations. This evening, the adjudicators have awarded the debate to the affirmative team for the effectiveness of their rebuttal, for the depth of their argument, and for the relevance and substantive nature of their arguments made. Congratulations. In addition, the panel tonight has awarded a Speaker Award to Kate for excellence in her rebuttal. Congratulations. To the team that have been successful tonight, hopefully the topics will be released very shortly. Wish you the best of luck in the following round, and we hope to see both teams again next year, either as adjudicators or potentially as debaters again. Thank you very much. I'll hand back to the chair.
I call upon a member of the runner-up team to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you to all three adjudicators for coming to adjudicate, and timekeeper, chairperson, my teammates, and everyone for coming to watch. And most of all to the opposing team, you guys did a really good debate. I was really impressed throughout the whole debate, so thank you for debating with us.
I call upon a member from the winning team to second that vote of thanks.
I'd first like to thank the adjudicators for adjudicating this debate, and of course the opposition. You gave a really good debate. We were sitting here like, that was really close. We don't even have an idea of who's going to win. Thank you to the audience for coming out to support us, taking away from your evening. Thank you. It was great to be able to speak to an audience. And thank you to the chairperson for running the debate and the timekeeper for keeping time. Thank you.
you for your attendance. I now declare this debate closed.